Realignment talk never ceases. We continue to charter the landscape here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everyone being here. Get yourself settled. Lock in for the next 90 minutes or so as we discuss recent scheduling decisions unveiled, an interesting hypothetical to present, and then we also have the news of the day, which just broke here in the last few minutes. Comments and questions we will take in the chat. Please consider using the super chat contribution as well. Matt Zemek's here to help us along. We always appreciate Matt's expertise and insight. You can catch Matt and myself every Monday night at 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific on USC Trojans Live over on the USC channel. Catch Matt every day on Trojans Wire. Matt, how you doing today?
Busy. I mean, USC's leaving for the Big Ten, but like the Pac-12 is still very much something I have to cover at Trojans Wire. So this San Diego State story, hey, and let's be thankful at the Voice of College Football. And, it's like today I'm not speaking as a USC guy. I'm speaking more as a college football guy. This is more of a national show. But just praise the Lord that we're doing this realignment stuff. We have a realignment news story in the middle of June. This is when it's supposed to happen, right? Not in the middle of football season. Definitely not on a football Saturday. Like we've been there before with Texas and Nebraska and Missouri in a decade ago. This is when realignment stuff's supposed to hit. And of course, for someone in my line of work, college sports blogging, this is just like manna in the desert. You get it right in the middle of the off season to fill these weeks before we get to August camp and the ramp up to the season. Now, like once we get into mid-August, no realignment news, please. But right now, it's exactly when you want it. 2 straight years, a significant Pac-12 realignment story breaking in June. So it's definitely good for the family business here at Trojans Wire.
Matt, I will say I fully back up all of that perspective on content creation. However, I do have a number of series that I'm trying to get to, and then all of this continues, it seems, every few days to pop up that kind of derails me. But this is the news of the day, and this is the most important. So my rankings of who should have won the 1942 national championship, of course, can wait. All right, Pete Thamel. To give credit here, was, I believe, the first to break the news on ESPN that San Diego State has given notice to the Mountain West that it, quote, intends to resign from the Mountain West Conference. So the interesting next comment or statement in quotes would be that the 1-month extension given unforeseen delays involving other collegiate athletic conferences beyond our control. So the San Diego State contingency asking for a 1-month extension, which directs me toward the Pac-12/10, Matt.
No question about it. And, in terms of like being able to read between the lines, like what's the most obvious dimension of all of this? And specifically that, SDSU wants to leave the Mountain West, but there's no Pac-12 offer today. What does that tell you? Pac-12 media rights deal still in flux. Like you would think that if an offer was made by the Pac-12 to San Diego State, like this would all be happening concurrently, that the timeline might be a little quicker. But San Diego State is really just trying to get out of the Mountain West, and it needs to do that before June 30th so that it doesn't get hammered with an extra exit fee and a much higher penalty. That was certainly being had been discussed the past several weeks that something was probably going to happen before June 30th. In the end of the college sports cycle, the end of the fiscal year, all that sort of stuff. So like.
Hopefully Matt has recognized that his video feed has frozen. We'll take your comments and questions here at the Voice of College Football again. There you are, Matt. I think we've got you back.
Usually this is the best room in my house for it, so don't know what's happening. Maybe some Mountain West gremlins are trying to get in the way. But anyway, so it tells me that that the media rights piece of this from the Pac-12 side isn't finalized, and San Diego State says, well, okay, we can't join the Pac-12 just yet. They're not ready, but we definitely want out of the Mountain West. And hey, Big 12, if you want to come make an offer for us, well, come on down. But we just want to get out of the Mountain West first, get that done, save the big exit penalty, which would be much larger if we didn't do this by the end of June. And then we'll deal with the new conference. So San Diego State's willing to be in limbo for a bit, trusting that one of these conferences is going to come its way, but it just wants to avoid that Mountain West exit fee escalating, which would happen after June 30th. So no one should regard this as a surprise on any of these fronts, but that seems to be the larger read of the landscape, that if the Pac-12 had a media rights deal lined up, well, then what are you waiting for? But the Pac-12 is waiting because, well, it hasn't landed the plane yet. And I think that's really where the focus of all this appropriately is right now.
Yeah, I guess it shouldn't be surprising that according to Thamel, there were, to quote him, terse responses back and forth and communications back and forth between San Diego State and the Mountain West. Of course, the Mountain West doesn't want to lose one of its best products, and San Diego State, of course, has to feel the pressure to a certain extent. They have the opportunity. They know that the money situation has to be dealt with in regards to making a wise decision. So they've got to act. They have to move, this being 1 year out, June of 2023 currently. So they are making a calculated risk is basically what they're doing here.
Absolutely. But I mean, in terms of, while we wait for all this to be sorted, I mean, a logical person would also say that even though the Pac-12 hasn't landed the plane yet, hasn't arrived at a media rights deal, you'd have to think that these prolonged negotiations for media rights were exploring, what ESPN, what other entities would want if San Diego State was in, if SMU, and all eyes on SMU now, with San Diego State making this movement, you would think that Kliavkoff was, including evaluations with San Diego State and SMU being part of the fold. So it's just another step, but, the timeline is not as rapid as some would like or as some expected. Of course, San Diego State speculation goes way back to, early November when the Dan Patrick show ran with, it's imminent. It's, about to happen. And, we were all pumping the brakes in terms of the imminent part. But we certainly thought that this was a realistic move, because the Pac-12 needs a presence in Southern California with USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten. So, the larger components, not surprising, but the timeline, timing is something where that's where the speculation has really been way off on so many fronts. And that's where, this constant Pac-12, Big 12 war among fans, journalists, people in the various imprints of the two conferences have really gone at each other, hammer and tongs, over the past several months. But in terms of the larger realities, none of these components and movements should be all that surprising.
So I don't think I'm making a bold statement in saying that San Diego State in a perfect world would prefer to be in the Pac-12. They have relationships. They have a history of playing Pac-12 opponents on a regular basis, and with a pretty high success rate considering they're in a group of 5 versus a Power 5 conference. So just go through the schedules year to year, folks. San Diego State playing the likes of USC, Stanford, UCLA, and others on a regular basis, Utah in recent years as well. And then obviously, based on where they're located, would love to stay in the Pac-12 and be that school to replace. And I know that they're not replacing from a weighty standpoint USC and UCLA, but taking up that territory and being a school that will play Power 5 football and athletics and located in Southern California. But I got to think, Matt, that they're certainly waiting for that number in terms of, okay, they have a general, I don't think it's going to be a situation where it's got to be $25 million per season from the Pac-12. And if it's 24.8, they're jumping ship. But obviously, that's a strong guideline of where they would like to be. They know what that is, and they're waiting to get that figure back. And then the Big 12 is obviously in play as well.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And, Tony Altamore, our consultant, our friend, who follows these larger questions of the dollars, the academics, and the larger equations facing the schools at the presidential level in terms of facing the chancellors and the upper administrative reaches at these schools. Yeah, like a few $1 million here or there, that's not going to move the needle. It has to be a Grand Canyon-sized differential to really get one of these Pac-12 schools to move, to get other schools to move. That's one important central point that we really need to nail down here. And so today's a really good day to do that.
Again, folks, Matt and I had decided to get together anyway for a conversation with all the news in the last 10 days concerning scheduling in the SEC and the Big Ten, with the new members jumping on board in 2024. Then we got hit with the San Diego State news. So that's the headline. Leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We also want to present a hypothetical, Matt, because at the time that Lincoln Riley chose USC, which we later determined and found out that had been in play for quite some time, but made that move from blue blood to blue blood going to the West Coast, that he was asked at one point about going to LSU, number one. And
that's right.
Harry Riley said, in a very wry sense, said, no, I'm not going to LSU. But of course, knowing at the time, or I'm trying to what's our timeline here? Yeah, so that was at the conclusion of 2022. Texas, Oklahoma made the move in the summer of 2022. A lot of speculation, whether that be just from critics and detractors of Lincoln Riley, saying that he was afraid of participating and competing in the SEC. And so he moves to the weak Pac-12, but now, just a year later, that decision made to go to the Big Ten. So Lincoln Riley, had he stayed at Oklahoma, would be facing the schedule that you and many others, myself, talked about and reviewed here just recently with the unveiling of the 24 SEC schedule. So you have tackled this hypothetical, and it's not even a hypothetical per se, unless he would switch jobs again, of Lincoln Riley facing the SEC and what that would have looked like here.
It's just so fascinating to contemplate. And of course, it's June. Like this is the month for college football fans and commentators to contemplate what ifs, right? Like in the middle of the season, we're dealing with what's real and what's right in front of us. But like in June, let's all sit back and just contemplate what it would have been like for Lincoln Riley to go up against this specific SEC schedule in 2024. So he could be going up against, and this is kind of the appetizer, I'm going to build toward the main course here at the Voice of College Football, but like he could have been facing former assistant Shane Beamer, when South Carolina goes to Norman. That would have been extremely spicy. Spencer Rattler transferred to South Carolina to be with Shane Beamer. Now Rattler's not going to be playing with South Carolina next year, but still, you would have had that as an amazing backstory for the Oklahoma-South Carolina game. You would have Lincoln Riley against Hugh Freeze when Oklahoma goes to Auburn, like two of the great offensive tacticians in recent college football history. So like that just would have been a play caller's delight. To have Lincoln Riley going up against Hugh Freeze. Now you would have had Lincoln Riley against, beloved Oklahoma icon, legend, Josh Heupel with Tennessee. Heupel won a national championship. You won a national championship for Bob Stoops. And you would have Lincoln Riley against Heupel when Tennessee goes to Norman next year. So that's a pretty spectacular game. And then, of course, Alabama, Lincoln Riley against Nick Saban in Memorial Stadium in Norman, a huge showcase. And you'd have Lincoln Riley. Here's the other thing. So Lincoln Riley was going to play Brian Kelly and LSU no matter what, as it turned out. You can say that this would have happened in the SEC, but it's going to happen next year anyway, since USC and LSU have played each other. And in many ways, Riley against Saban, okay, two heavyweights, no question, but really the ultimate coaching battle, you could say, in 2024, and it's going to happen. Lincoln Riley against Brian Kelly, not just two immensely successful coaches, but also coaches who've struggled to win college football playoff semifinals. Like neither one has been able to get over that hump. And on consecutive days, November 28 and 29 in 2021, both coaches shock the college football world, creating seismic developments that we had never seen before. Unprecedented for a head coach at the height of his powers at Oklahoma to leave for USC, and then one day later, a head coach at the height of his powers at Notre Dame to leave for LSU. So Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, and you mentioned this, at the open, with Riley having to fend off the rumors about LSU, and it turned out to be a smokescreen for the move to USC. That spices the pot even more. But Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, with these shocking departures, these shocking nomadic movements from established superpowers to other powers in college football, to see the two of them go head to head, it's going to be a remarkable battle. But yet there are still several battles that Lincoln Riley left behind in the SEC, which just would have been absolutely spectacular storylines in their own right if Lincoln Riley was still at Oklahoma. It's fascinating to contemplate.
Matt, you skipped over the Oklahoma-Texas game for obvious reasons. They already play.
I'm wearing burnt orange too.
They already play. You are wearing the burnt orange, but they already play. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal would be they are members of the SEC. Just the added zing that would bring to that rivalry, and which one is going to show that they are better prepared and equipped to be a contender initially in the SEC.
And you know what? I didn't forget about Texas, but I do have USC connections at Trojans Wire. Like I think about USC all the time, and from a USC fan's perspective, Steve Sarkisian is not yet in the same tier as the other elite coaches I mentioned, like Josh Heupel, Nick Saban, Hugh Freeze. Now I did mention Shane Beamer, so Beamer's not in the top tier, but he had a fascinating Oklahoma storyline because he used to work for Lincoln Riley, and you also have Spencer Rattler transferring from OU to South Carolina. That's why I mentioned Beamer. But those other coaches, Heupel, Saban, Freeze, like they've all established themselves to varying degrees as top tier coaches, but 7-win Sark, not nearly in the same conversation. And so, Oklahoma fans who are upset at me for anything I've said about how great Lincoln Riley is and how glad USC is to have him. Hey, I've always said that Texas is little brother as long as 7-win Sark is there, and 7-win Sark needs to do a lot of good work. He needs to do a lot of heavy lifting to change that conversation. So maybe Oklahoma fans are going to like what I say for once here at the Voice of College Football.
All right, folks, you know what the deal is. We've got an Amazon link, and most of you shop on Amazon. That's what the numbers tell us. And so when you shop on Amazon, help yourself by helping us. And please use the link that we provide in the description section of all the videos. Just grab the link, put it somewhere where you will use it on a regular basis and not forget it. And you help us grow and build the channel. So we appreciate that. Matt and I are going to talk scheduling for the next hour or so. We invite your comments and questions. Consider a super chat as well. So, Matt, I wanted to move on to the SEC scheduling overall. And while the Big Ten had announced a week earlier its scheduling format and its 24 and 25 schedules, the SEC was a bit more cryptic. The Big Ten laid it out for us to basically understand protected games, 2-year cycles of opponents that were going to be scheduled in these 2-year cycles, that they were going to be analyzing, and they were going to continue to review competitive situations in regards to the monitoring of basically who's winning and who's not when it gets right down to it. And, they went through, I thought, a little bit more systematically and unveiled more to us than the SEC did. So I'll run through kind of the tenets of the SEC scheduling unveiling. And of course, we got the games for 2024. But first and foremost is that the league announced. Okay, here we go. Home and away designations in 2024 were built with the provision that no school will travel to the same location to which it traveled in 2023. To me, that is a complete non-factor. I don't even know why that was considered. Now, if they can build the schedule that is the optimum schedule and still hit that priority, that's fine. That's well and good. I don't even know why that's a priority. And if that got in the way of building an equitable, strong schedule, then aside from wanting to, kind of serve certain fan bases and not wanting to travel to certain destinations 2 years in a row, I think that's a complete non-factor myself, unless you're seeing something there that I'm not.
No, I'm very much in agreement there. I think, this is a 1-year schedule. I think that's really the big news story, is that whereas the Big Ten not only has a 2-year grid mapped out for 2024 and 2025, but the Big Ten has already committed to saying, like, we're going to be doing this in future 2-year installments. There will be a 2026, 2027 2-year block. There'll be a 2028, 2029 2-year block in which it's going to allocate games, road trips, et cetera, et cetera. And it's laid out that framework with the protected games, Iowa having 3, Penn State having none, USC having 1. And you can see kind of the larger architecture of the Big Ten Conference and how that schedule is going to work 2 years from now, 4 years from now, and so on. But with the SEC, it's just a 1-year thing. And that leads really to the big question. It's less about what does this schedule look like. Like the schedule is just kind of there. Like you don't know what it's going to be leading to. And so that really, for me, is the key question. Like, what's on the other side of this? What's going to happen in 2025? And let's remember that the 12-year contract between ESPN, Disney, and the College Football Playoff, it ends after the 2025 season. You're going to see a new round of negotiations for playoff media rights begin for the 2026 season. So you have to think that that's top of mind for ESPN Disney, and therefore it's top of mind for Greg Sankey, and it's top of mind for Fox, CBS, NBC, who all presumably, want to have their foot in the door, get at least 1 or 2 games, at least a few games as part of this package. You're not going to see ESPN Disney owning all of it anymore. But that leads me to, ESPN Disney obviously didn't have enough muscle and leverage in the room to get a 9-game SEC schedule for this first season in 2024 with Texas and Oklahoma. So was that an epic fail by ESPN Disney, not being able to get this, hammered out firmly in the contractual agreement? Like that to me, that seems like a huge fail by ESPN. But maybe this is Greg Sankey's way of saying, all right, Nick Saban, a lot of other power brokers in the SEC wanted to stay at 8 in 2024. Okay, give me some time, ESPN. Give me some time, Bob Iger. I'm going to work on Saban. I'm going to work on my constituency. I'm going to land this plane. We're going to have 9 games, but we just weren't ready to do this in 2024. And if you're going to have to split that 12-team playoff television pie with Fox, NBC, CBS beginning in 2026, yeah, I know I need to give you more value. But then you go the other way. What if Sankey can't push this thing through and get it to 9 games and give ESPN Disney more leverage. Will the trade-off be that ESPN Disney retains more of the 12-team playoff in 2026 than most industry insiders probably currently expect? So you really have a friction between those two forces. I mean, I highly doubt that ESPN Disney has enough pull to get both the 9-game SEC schedule, which it obviously wants, and as much of the 2026, future playoff pie as it wants. ESPN's probably going to get one, but not both. And so you have Greg Sankey right in the middle of all of that, knowing that, ESPN Disney wants the 9th game, knowing that ESPN wants to still be the primary playoff rights holder once we get to 2026 and a new round of negotiations. So how those two big needs for ESPN Disney play off each other, and how Sankey, obviously a very powerful man, tries to resolve those tensions. Like, that to me is the big takeaway of the SEC schedule being a 1-year plan, with no long-term rollout and roadmap. And also, just not having the 9 games that ESPN Disney obviously wanted, and have to be bitterly disappointed that they didn't get. There has to be something on the other side of this, and it's Greg Sankey, who's going to have a lot of influence in the room. But, Nick Saban is not a political lightweight, to put it mildly. So it's not as though it's a slam dunk that Greg Sankey can get this done. I mean, he's not a man to bet against, but then again, I was certainly thinking that there would be a 9-game schedule in 2024 with all that TV money waiting to be made, and it didn't happen. So, that was already an upset. What other upsets are coming just around the bend in the SEC and the college football playoff?
So I interpreted that delay or the unveiling of only one season rather than this is our model. This is what we're
Absolutely.
how we're going to approach it going forward.
Yep.
Because currently, we currently in the SEC and the ACC in particular, we could all, as college football fans, we could map out the next 50 years of schedules because they are cookie cutter and there's a specific formula that's used, and it's A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. This is more nuanced to say these are the priorities. This is what we're considering. This is what weighed into our decision. But once we unveil the schedule, there's no one who out there you can predict, you can take these bullet points and you can probably gauge who's most likely on the schedule. And of course, there are protected games there, but yeah, it's not just a specific model. And yes, the exclusion of format being displayed and communicated to all of us going forward, to me, was the 8 versus 9 game battle continuing to be waged and put off for another round.
Let me jump in with this particular point, Mark, and for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football. So in light of everything that we've said, the Big Ten had a multi-year rollout, and you know what the Big Ten's long-term plan is for its schedule. I think that the SEC is going to come up with another 1-year only schedule in 2025. I do not think that when we get to future schedules for the SEC, having committed to 2024, you're not going to see a 2025, 26, 27 plan or a 2025, 2026 2-year plan. I think you're looking at another 1-year deal, and then we make the transition to the new playoff era. And so that's when you might see a 2, 3, 4-year grid starting with 2026, when, after the new playoff negotiations have taken place, because that way ESPN, Disney, and the other media partners, they can weigh, what's going to be on a 2026 schedule, and what everyone can take from in terms of the pie. And we can map that out in terms of, and balance that against how many playoff games each network is going to get. So I think 2025 is going to be another holding pattern type situation, whether it's with 9 games or 8, I'm not sure, but it's just going to be a 1-year schedule. And, the fact that you've had a 2024 schedule with OU and Texas, well, you can just do a 2025 schedule in which you flip a lot of home and road assignments. You probably add a few new games into the mix, like you want Oklahoma and Texas to play different schools compared to 2024. But like, it's not that hard to just, do a lot of flipping home and road from your 2024 architecture. You do a 1-year deal in 2025. And then in 2026, you can get around to, all right, here's the future of the SEC. This is what the next 4 years are going to look like in terms of rotations and protected games and all that sort of thing. But I think all of this that we're talking about, it certainly points to 2025 being another 1-year deal, a 1-year schedule plan for the SEC.
Folks, we're excited about what we've got going on our USC channel each and every week, and you should be as well. Tim and Rick get together every Sunday night to present Trojan Conquest Live. It's a tremendous look at USC football, all the late breaking news, analysis, and tremendous guests. Anthony Munoz a couple weeks ago. If you have yet to see it, go to the USC channel and check out the interview with Anthony Munoz, one of the all-time greats in college football and the NFL in particular. Matt and I get together every Monday night for Trojans Live. That's at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. Tim has launched a show in which he takes calls on Trojan Conquest as well, and another special edition that airs periodically, again with Tim taking your calls on USC football on Trojan Conquest live call-in show. And then, as you see on the banner right there, USC channel has YouTube memberships which feature segments that Matt and I produced together. We have produced 6. The latest is a look, Big Ten fans, at the most important season in the history of the Big Ten. And then we also discussed some groundbreaking decisions throughout history in which the Big Ten has changed its own landscape and the landscape of college football. So great stuff there. You got to get involved on our USC channel. The next bullet point is pretty obvious, but it's important, and I agree with it. 2 primary factors include traditional opponents. So, of course, they're going to protect the traditional rivalries, and then the balance of schedule strength, which leads to the next bullet point, which clarifies their approach here. It was based on each school's conference winning percentage over the last 11 football seasons. It says 2012, so 12 through 22 would be 11 football seasons. So my first thought is, how much of these programs changed in regards to their success on the field in 10 or 11 years? So as it turns out, for me personally, I didn't have an issue with this. Auburn was a much stronger program then, but certainly have the ability to improve considerably here. Florida was a much better program 10 years ago, but again, they've only had a down 2 seasons. They certainly are well equipped, maybe not necessarily with their head coach. The jury's still out on Billy Napier in particular, but with facilities, recruiting, and everything that they have at their disposal. So I didn't see a huge issue with this, and they did the same with Oklahoma and Texas. However, so this is almost taking a page from the NFL scheduling model in terms of a formula of weighting it toward successful teams have to play tougher schedules and less successful teams play the weaker end. However, they didn't let that overtake the schedule because they did guarantee that everyone plays 4 opponents from the upper half or the lower half of the schedule. So if you're Vanderbilt and you've got a winning percentage that's probably about 15 or 20% in the conference over the last 10 seasons, you're not going to consistently play the 8 worst teams in the league year after year after year. There is a component to balance out those extremes. Any thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a correct read, and I do think that most of the schedules wound up being very balanced and very reasonable. And to me, the big question this raises is, of teams which either were disappointing in 2023 or 2022, or which went through transitions. Like you look at Auburn as a natural example. Total mess under Brian Harsin, but now you get Hugh Freeze, and he's an accomplished coach. I mean, say what you want about his ethics and morality, separate conversation. The dude can coach, and so can he author a year 1 revival akin to what Lincoln Riley did at USC? Not predicting that. I'm just laying it out there as a hypothetical where if a program that struggled or was a real mess in 2022 suddenly surges in 2023, a lot of these SEC schedule components are going to look different. Like how desirable is it to play Auburn? Like right now, it seems relatively desirable, but that could change based on how the Tigers play in the first month of the season. And another really good example, Texas A&M. Where does Jimbo Fisher have the Aggies? And really, to me, that was the number one story of the SEC schedule release for 2024. And that is that if Jimbo doesn't hit it out of the park in 2024, when's he going to do it? Because he is not going to get an SEC schedule as favorable as that 2024 release. And just in terms of the politics, like this was Sankey and the SEC's way of throwing Texas A&M a bone for allowing Oklahoma and Texas to come into the conference, right? I think most people would agree on that. But Texas A&M better feast at the table, having been thrown this bone, because not playing Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, okay, so here we go, Jimbo. You better make something of this. You better be able to win at least 10 and probably 11. And of course, now this is where I'm briefly going to put on my USC hat. All right. If we compare USC's 2024 schedule to Texas A&M's 2024 schedule, precisely because A&M's SEC schedule is largely bereft of the high-end SEC heavyweights. There's no argument, there's no debate. If either team goes 11-1, that's you're making the 12-team playoff. But 10-2, right? 10-2 is going to be that Mendoza line, 50-50. If you get that record, are you in the 12-team playoff or not? That's going to be the middle ground where you might get into some really tense, contentious arguments. Well, because Texas A&M's 2024 schedule, all right, you have Notre Dame there, but then the SEC schedule is really a lot lighter than it could have been, or one could say should have been. If USC and Lincoln Riley go 10-2 in 2024, and Jimbo and A&M also go 10-2 in 2024, it's clear USC will get into the playoff first. I mean, maybe Texas A&M gets in, but USC will be first in line if those two teams are involved in a 10-2 dispute for a 2024 at-large berth in the college football playoff. USC will definitely get first in line if the Trojans and the Aggies both have the same record. So, hey, Jimbo, I would strongly advise that you go 11-1 in 2024 if you want to have a long-term successful career in College Station. First off, because if you're 10-2, you're probably not getting in. And if you're probably not getting in 2024, well, the SEC schedules you're going to face in 2025, 6, 7, 8 they're all going to be tougher than this one, because you just got the jackpot in 2024. So Jimbo Fisher, 2024 is really going to be an if not now, when type of season in College Station.
So I don't think that anyone with half of a brain for college football would argue that this is a weak schedule in comparison to schedules across the country. But for an SEC schedule, I'm right there with you, Matt. I did not look at this specifically. I don't remember looking at Texas A&M's schedule. Who's the best program in the conference? Well, it's Georgia currently. There's no Georgia. There's no Alabama. So right out of the gate, I wonder how many teams are missing both of them. It's got to be very few.
Yep. It has to be very few. I haven't done the research, but it has to be very few. Like LSU is the best team on that schedule. Period.
Now,
like
I'm not saying that Tennessee has established itself as a power, but who was the third best team in the SEC last year? Or arguably the second best team in the SEC? Well, it was Tennessee. They're not there. So you could argue that they're missing the three best teams in the conference, at least as it currently stands.
You're missing three of the top four. With and LSU is the one of the top four that landed on the schedule. Yes, it's just a remarkably favorable schedule. Now, wow. I mean, not to say, and of course, not to say for any Florida Gator fans that going to Gainesville is going to be, piece of cake. But It's the non-Alabama, non-Georgia, non-Tennessee part of it. That's what we're all focusing
Wow.
on, to avoid all three of those. So, Jimbo, you want to earn all that oil money that's been flowing your way the past several years? Well, 2024, time to deliver, baby.
Yeah, and 2024 is going to be a what, eighth season for Jimbo Fisher. So if he has not delivered by then,
Yep. Yep. I mean, if he goes 8-4 against that, I mean, he's done, right? He has to be done if he goes 8-4 in 2024, after presumably not doing anything particularly special in 2023. One would have to think that's it. You're gone.
and again, based on my evaluation, if somebody was running into the schedule in the ACC, that would be different. You know, those
Totally different.
they're
Yeah,
they're
sure.
all quality, capable, talented programs. But they're
Yes.
they're all almost all of them are mid-tier or lower tier SEC outside of LSU.
And the
Yeah.
fact that you will have a 16-team SEC, which is supposed to be bigger and better and badder than ever, and you're missing all those programs in the top tier, it's going to become that much more conspicuous how favorable this schedule really is, which concurrently it ramps up the pressure on Jimbo to really deliver something special. And
Folks,
by special again, we mean 11-1, because if he's 10-2, that's going to put A&M toward the back of the line. Might not eliminate them, but it's certainly going to put the Aggies in the back of the line behind a potential 10-2 USC, 10-2 Michigan, which is playing USC in the Big Ten in 2024. So like, because the Big Ten is going to be souped up, like that's another plot point where if you're 10-2 in the SEC, well, you better have at least one heavyweight win in the mix if you're going to get one of those at-large berths in the 12-team playoff. The window is clearly more narrow for A&M in 2024 if it goes 10-2. It's going to be in the back of the line relative to other blue bloods. Or I should say relative to blue bloods, not other blue bloods, because A&M isn't a blue blood. I had to catch myself there.
Not currently, not historically. And
Yeah.
if you believe in the semantics that I do, if you're not historically, then you aren't currently. Clemson being an example, they could win 20 national championships in a row, at least based on my definition. I'm not saying it's the only definition, but if you're not a blue blood at any point, they're elite. Clemson's elite or has been elite, but I don't consider them a blue blood because they have not historically been elite since the days of black and white and leather helmets. The Amazon link's in the description section, folks. It doesn't cost you a penny. Please use the Amazon link and help us grow the voice of college football. So, Matt, we've got about 40 to 45 minutes, folks. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. You can give us a call. And while we're waiting on calls, I'm going to deliver this one to you, Matt, because this war is being waged in the chat. Currently, it's waged many times when we talk scheduling concerning the SEC. I see it all the time. I've addressed it. I'd like to get your take. The SEC proponents will say, we don't need to play 9 games. Our league is the best. There's a gap above everybody else. Why would we need to play a more difficult schedule? We also already play the toughest teams in America. The detractors, critics of the SEC would say, you need to play 9 games. There are schools like Kentucky that has that default game against Louisville. They play 3 cream puffs. You need to get with the program, with the rest of college football, play 75% of your games in the league, like the Pac-12, like the Big 12, like the Big 10, and join the rest of us. There needs to be uniformity. What say you?
I started writing about college football back in 2001 for College Football News. Over the past 22 years, like it's as sure as the sun rises in the east, SEC cream puff scheduling, SEC non-conference scheduling has been a centerpiece topic for me when I write about college football during the season. So here's the thing. And, 20 years ago when I was starting out in this business, like I was directing all my ire toward the SEC. Like, you bunch of cowards. Like, you think you're the best. You think you're the whole deal. You think you're the center of the universe in college football. Play more people. Travel outside your region. Why are you such cowards? But then in like the last several years, with the advent of the playoff, with the advent of more high stakes games and just the increasing television money, the conferences expanding, realignment having its way, you realize as you get older, this is not charity. All right, you're not supposed to make things harder on yourself just to make everyone else in the room feel better. You're here to win. You're here to make money. This is the game. This is how it's played. And so we can call the SEC cowards all we want, but the titles keep flowing. The money keeps being made. Like, if it's working, why would you deviate from it? And here's really the big point, is that college football, college sports just doesn't have good, if any, central governance. So like, there's no person there to say and enforce, you have to do this. You have to be in line with everyone else. There's no one to say or enforce any kind of principle which says, oh, all Power 5 conferences have to play the same amount of conference games. There's no one there to say it. There's no one there to do it. So if you're the SEC, why would you go up to 9? And you're just going to laugh at the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the Pac-12 and say, hey, no one was forcing you to play 9. All y'all could have just played 8. Well, we're just going to walk away with national championship after national championship. We're going to keep getting 2 teams into the playoff. We're going to keep just loading up. And hey, when the 12-team college football playoff begins, all your berths belong to us. All the prizes, we're just going to keep, just bringing them in at the poker table. Like, you did not have to do things the way that you did them. The SEC is going to tell everyone else, and the SEC is going to be correct. So unless or until there's like an enforcement mechanism, there's a central governing force or authority that mandates the SEC to have to fall in line with everyone else. Really, if you are the SEC, why would you do that? Just to appease other people and massage their feelings? Like, that's not what this is about. So, like, hey, it is cowardly, all right? Like, don't get me wrong. It is cowardly for the SEC to say, it just means more. And then, well, we don't want to play 9 games in our conference. That's going to be too difficult. So like, I'm on board that train emotionally, intellectually, but you can't say, well, how awful it is that the SEC is doing this. The SEC shouldn't be allowed to do this. Well, maybe the SEC shouldn't be allowed to do this, but who's going to do that enforcement? Who's going to, make that a binding legal contractual reality? There's no one there. So if you're the SEC and you're an SEC fan, you're sitting here just laughing all the way to the bank, and I can't blame you. Like, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. So that's really where we are, right? Like, yes, aesthetically and in terms of the quality of the product, it's bad. But if you're the SEC, really, why would you change? Why would you break up something that's been working so handsomely, so magnificently for a very, very long period of time?
Yeah, Matt, you're taking up what's been my talking point for a long, long time, because these conference commissioners are employed by the conferences to do what is best for the conference, which is pretty much twofold if you really want to break it down. It's more complicated than this, but it comes down to make the most money and field the best product, or skew or take advantage of whatever rules exist or don't exist to lean the field in your favor. And so that's what Greg Sankey's doing, and others that want an 8-game conference schedule. It's similar to me as the Notre Dame situation. I want Notre Dame to be in a conference. I believe Notre Dame should be in a conference. Do I blame Notre Dame? No. They are doing what they are allowed to do.
Totally. That's right. Like, who wouldn't want to see Notre Dame in the Big 10 playing Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin? Like, there's such a natural, obvious fit. Would be great for college football and the regular weekly quality of games, instead of playing Marshall, whom, it couldn't even beat last year, nudge, nudge. But like, Notre Dame's able to build in so many schedule breathers, being able to just do carte blanche with its schedule. And, that rubs me the wrong way. But if you're Notre Dame, why would you give that up? Why would you give up the money? With all the money's coming just into your pot, you're not sharing it with any other conference. Really, why would you walk away from that if you're Notre Dame? There's no good reason to.
One other point before we take this call. Do the math, folks. When the SEC does not play that ninth conference game, they are playing cream puffs all over the place, typically. Now, let's be fair and let's be honest. There are 4 designated rivalries for the SEC Eastern Division teams: Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina against the ACC. Many of them, I would say 3/4 of the time, I think I would be accurate, typically schedule a second Power 5, as Georgia did last year, Georgia Tech plus Oregon. So they typically load up with a second game, but much of the conference does not. So I would say probably 25 to 33% of the conference does play that second Power 5 game, but most of them do not. And so if you take that 16, what is going to be now 16 teams that play the cream puff game, they're winning all those games. Maybe they go 15-1, and typically that one is Vandy losing to Middle Tennessee. So that's inconsequential anyway, because they're not going to a bowl game. So instead of that 15-1 or 16-0, they all play each other. They go 8-8. So the league is losing 7 to 8 wins throughout the league. I'm looking at you, Missouri, because you've gone 6-6 or 5-5 in the COVID season, like 3 consecutive years. You have reached the bowl game basically because you've not played an additional conference game. So there is 1 or 2 SEC teams that slip into a bowl game because of not playing a ninth conference game.
Oh, it's the tried and true formula, right? Go 2-6 in the SEC, go 4-0 in your non-conference slate, because you get 4 non-conference bites at the apple. Like, that's been a tried and true path for mid and lower tier teams in the SEC. And so again, like if that's not being regulated out of the sport, and you're in that lower part of the food chain in the SEC, again, why would you deviate from that? Why would you break from that? Another point to mention here is that even for the programs in the SEC that do play an extra Power 5 opponent, like the Georgia, Oregon, and I'm not blaming Georgia here, but this is just points to how it reinforces how smart the SEC is in terms of maximizing dollars and victories. When the SEC plays that extra Power 5 opponent, it's almost always on favorable or at least neutral turf. Alabama playing USC or Michigan in Arlington. It's not gonna have the smaller partisan crowd there. Georgia playing Oregon in Atlanta. For all intents and purposes, a home game. You can technically call it neutral site all you want. That was a Georgia home game. It's like the SEC usually puts its teams in favorable situations. But of course, next year, 2024, LSU going to Vegas to play USC. Like, now that is an exceptional moment. That is an unusual moment with Las Vegas now joining Arlington, Jerry World, and Georgia, Atlanta, the Georgia Dome, or Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I meant to say, with Las Vegas now becoming another one of these early season neutral site games. Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, the home of the Raiders. One would think that SoFi Stadium is also going to become a site for early season neutral site games, with more Western venues entering the picture for Labor Day weekend and these early September neutral site games. It's going to be fascinating to see how that equation changes for the SEC and for other Power 5 programs. But to this point in time, the SEC, even when it does stick its neck out a little, like not a lot, but a little, and it plays an extra Power 5 opponent in a neutral setting, it's almost always in a favorable turf situation for the conference. And then the league has just been very smart, very tactical in terms of how it handles those kinds of considerations.
Our congratulations go out to the Florida Gators, who will be stepping on a campus outside the state of Florida and outside of SEC territory for a non-conference game for the first time since 1991 at Syracuse. when they go to Bryce Eccles Stadium this September. The Real MVP's here to talk some college football. DeReal, what's going on?
Oh, I was just loving the last 20 minutes of Matt's point because he was basically saying what I was saying yesterday. Listen, don't hate the player, hate the game. Everybody's saying the SEC is cowards. Everybody's saying SEC's bad. Everybody's saying the SEC trash. How about you beat us? How about beat us in a game?
Or how about have better commissioners?
Yeah, have better commissioners. Have smarter commissioners. Listen, I'm a fan of Kentucky. We have scheduled cream puffs since like 2007. I'm not joking. I think Indiana was the last team we played other than Louisville.
Yeah.
It's been
That used to
2007.
be a rivalry of sorts. Yes.
Right. And you know what the punishment's been? Nothing. I mean, USC, Notre Dame, UCLA, they're the only three schools that haven't played an FCS team. What have they gotten? Have they gotten a plaque, a medal, or anything for that?
I would say that Kentucky's punishment for all those cream puffs was this 2024 SEC schedule.
Hey, it's not too bad. Nasty. It's not too bad. It could be a lot worse.
Oh, it's nasty.
Oh, it could be a lot worse than I think. But listen, Matt, I think you were getting to a lot of the picture, but I think the SEC, we want to see before we go to 9 games, and this is just my speculation, is could a 9-3 or even an 8-4 team make the college football playoff? If the answer is yes, then we'll probably go to 9 games. If the answer is no, then they probably won't go to 9 games. USC is a perfect example in 2024. Let's say they lose to LSU, Notre Dame, who was it? Ohio State and Penn State they play. They lose to all 4 of them. They still could be one of the 12 best teams in the country. But I think everybody's going to write them off saying, well, they're 8-4, so they're automatically not a top 12 team. Well, why is that the case? If you lose to 4 top 8 teams, you still could be one of the 12 best teams in the country.
I answered Matt the other night. DeReal and I discussed this. So I gave him my take on that 9-3 and 8-4. I think 2 things come into play. One would be the success of the SEC. So while the College Football Playoff Committee tells us that they review and analyze only the performance on the field for this current season, there is no question that the SEC has equity in the bank. When you dominate the sport, win championships, have what I believe is a 14-4 playoff record all time, then they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. They're going to get the tiebreaker. So when there's a 10-2 tiebreaker and it involves 4 or 5 schools and only 2 can make the playoff, you can bet that they're going to be SEC teams. It may, in some instances, stretch it to an unfavorable record, let's say a 9-3, receiving the nod over a 10-2 that's kind of a quote-unquote ugly 10-2. Maybe you got blown out in one or both of those 2 losses to the 2 best teams on your schedule and really didn't have a weighty 10-2 mark that a 9-3 from the SEC would get the call there. However, 8-4, I think that's going to take maybe some time or never be able to be achieved. That's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I would say that your argument, the real MVP, is it comes into play if a team is 9-3, and I think if USC goes 9-3 and it loses 2 Big Ten games, and it loses one of those 2 non-conference games to either Notre Dame or LSU in 2024, I think that would make the argument that the 9-game Big Ten schedule instead of 8 might have cost USC a shot at the playoff. Because what if that 9th game, is against either Michigan, Wisconsin, or Penn State? You lop off that 9th game, you replace it with a cupcake or at least just a more manageable game. That could be the difference between 9-3 and 10-2. And I've said, and I think we need to all be clear on this, that in the playoff, 11-1, you're definitely getting in. 9-3, you're almost certainly out. 10-2 is going to be the battleground record. That's going to be the record, at least the first one. It's going to be the primary point of reference for having, 50-50 balls, really difficult choices for the committee. It's going to be between 10-2 teams from Power 5 conferences. That's really where most of the controversies we're going to have in the 12-team playoff era are going to get settled. So if the 9-game conference schedule is such a beast that a team finishes 9-3, that's going to be the interesting case study, and will the committee look at, let's say a team just has the most unbelievably difficult schedule and it goes 9-3. Will that team get in over, the ugly 10-2 that Mark referenced? We always see it in college football. Like, you win all the 10 games you're supposed to win. You lose the 2 games against the 2 best teams on your schedule. All right, it's 10 wins, but what have you done? What have you accomplished? And will that kind of team be elevated over a 9-3 team, which has the high end wins, played a tougher schedule, but has one more loss? And of course, in terms of 1-win differentials, there, one win always looks better than one more loss, but 10 versus 9, double digits versus single digits, like that 10 looks so much better than that 9, even if the quality of the 10 wins is not nearly as good as the 9. Like, that's just a human nature thing where, 10 wins just seems like that shiny object. Will the committee be able to look past that? So like 8-4, we don't need to worry about. But I think if a team plays a really tough schedule, partly as a consequence of playing 9 conference games instead of 8, and it lands at 9-3, where it's really in playoff jeopardy, then it's going to be a problem. But if a team plays 9 conference games and finishes 10-2, that's going to help, not hurt, the overall playoff case, at least most likely. So there are lots of layers to this.
I would agree largely with what you're saying. I'm trying to push the envelope a bit, Matt, because I think there's going to be a few years where a Big 12 team or a Pac-12 team goes 10-2, and their record is not nearly going to be as good as a lot of 9-3 teams. But I'm afraid it's going to get to the point where it's 10 wins and they're automatically in. That's what I'm afraid is going to happen.
The Real is here, of course, to speak for himself. But if I was going to summarize his stance on the sport, the SEC rules the sport. The Big Ten is a factor, and everybody else doesn't count.
Yes, that's basically it. Everybody else is playing for third place. Sorry. That's just the way it's going to be. And there's a narrative I would like to shoot down that's been in this chat a few times, and I've seen other places. The Big Ten has 13 teams playing 10 Power 5 opponents, while only 2 SEC teams are playing 10 Power 5 opponents. Mark, if you had a choice between making the playoffs and your final opponent for the SEC was just Georgia, okay? And the Big Ten opponent, you had to play Rutgers and Maryland. Which road would you rather go down?
I don't think I need to answer that question.
Okay, I'm just saying, because these people saying, oh, it's 10 Power 5 teams versus only 2 SEC teams are doing it, means the Big Ten's automatically playing the harder schedule. Come on, people. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about Power 5 scheduling, like the obvious follow-up we need to ask is, okay, what caliber Power 5s, right? Because there's a large degree of variance among Power 5s. And so, yeah, like that discussion always needs to be looked at more finely and more fully. That, if you're playing Kansas, if you're playing Stanford, if you're playing, what 2023 Colorado is likely to be, a 3-9 team or thereabouts, like, you're not necessarily challenging yourself more than if you play, say, a top end AAC team or a top end Mountain West team. So yeah, that discussion always needs to have that qualifier.
Yes. There are ranked teams and there are ranked teams. Alabama gets ranked every week.
And they're ranked teams.
Yes, and then there are ranked teams. Yes. A number 25 Fresno State is not a number 3 Alabama. Just like with the Power 5s, all the Power 5s aren't all better than all the. So it's an indicator. It starts the conversation. Okay, most likely if you're playing more Power 5s, you're most likely playing a better schedule. But then let's look at the schedule itself. Cincinnati and BYU and others, previous group of 5 teams, were certainly more competitive and stronger opponents. Like, look at Arkansas. They played Cincinnati and BYU the last 2 years. Those are better challengers than probably 40 to 60% of the Power 5.
I just wanted to put that out there because that's just one of those frustrating takes that that I'm almost positive they don't believe in, but are just putting it try to dunk on the SEC in any way they can, Mark. But oh my goodness! So with San Diego State, where do we think they're ending up? Are they ending up in the Big 12 or the Pac-12? Because depending on whose Twitter timeline you look at, they're definitely going to the Big 12 or they're definitely going to the Pac-12.
So the real MVP, I think the here's the way to look at this. And at Trojans Wire, if you look at our site, we have not waded into this Big 12 Pac-12 war of the bloggers and the podcast hosts over the past several months. Whatever Dennis Dodd says from the Big 12 side, whatever John Woner and John Canzano say from the Pac-12 side, hey, we've stayed out of it because this is just a wait and see situation. And there's so many components to this, as you can well appreciate, as everyone can appreciate here at the Voice of College Football. So, there has been so much bad information. There's been so much speculation, so many twists and spins of the rumor mill. And we're just waiting for George Kliavkoff to either land the plane or crash the plane, whichever winds up happening. And so we advise caution in terms of jumping to a premature conclusion on all of this. So no guarantees, no done deals. We all need to learn to have less of that inclination in these realignment dramas. But simply because of geography, and I know that USC and UCLA busted up geography, but if the Pac-12 wanted to get another team after losing USC and UCLA, San Diego State is clearly the best, most desirable option. And again, as Mark said much earlier in the show, it doesn't mean the Aztecs are going to come anywhere close to replacing the value, the prestige, the overall significance, heft, stature of USC. Of course they're not. But in terms of being the best that the Pac-12 can do under its given set of undesirable circumstances, the Aztecs are clearly number one. So that doesn't guarantee it the Aztecs are going to go to the Pac-12, but it certainly means that with this movement today, they are putting themselves in position for this to happen. And now it's up to Kliavkoff to cement the media rights deal, which, presumably he's been negotiating with prospective media partners and saying, okay, with San Diego State in our conference, with SMU in our conference, what would you be willing to do? What can we create? How can we expand value for our members? And, talking with Amazon and Apple, as well as, the regular television networks and ESPN, you would think that this moves things closer to a San Diego State Pac-12 outcome. But if you've learned anything about realignment speculation, realignment frenzy over the past 12 months, over the past 12 years, the main lesson is speak less, listen more, and wait for the truly substantive, weighty developments to occur. And then we can all carry the speculation through the next round. But in terms of final outcomes, we just all need to wait and see for certain things to happen. And that next thing to happen is Pac-12 media rights. That should be the focus for everyone. That's going to be a determinant and revealer of a lot of different things. And until that happens, until Kliavkoff lands the plane, it's still a guessing game. Because if Kliavkoff isn't able to land that plane, that means that you have Brett Yormark over there in the Big 12, and he wants to expand, and he's always looking for angles, and he seems very proactive from everything that we've seen. If Kliavkoff can't land the plane, then Yormark could pounce. So I'm not pronouncing this as a done deal. If we've learned anything, it's don't be premature, wait for it to play out. No one gets hurt that way. And we can all wait for the next really big domino to fall.
Got our buddy Rick Anaya, LBC Trojans, says an 8-game SEC schedule allows 4 home, 4 away conference games and makes possible 4 out-of-conference home games for 8 total home games versus only 4 on the road. 9 games forces the team to play 5 away games every other year. That's mostly true. We can certainly cite SEC teams going on the road. The 4 that I cited: Georgia, South Carolina, Florida and Kentucky obviously play their rivals from the ACC on the road every other year. And there's a few other examples of this. Alabama has finally found whatever maybe mileage stipend or whatever that they've needed to travel just here in the last year and going to Texas while not playing a true road game out of conference since going to Happy Valley in 2011. So Alabama finally breaking the mold and traveling and going out of conference on campus.
That was very interesting comment. I like how you put that they found their mileage, Mark. Alabama did.
Yeah, they could only make it to NFL stadiums for whatever reason during that long stretch of time. To Matt's earlier point.
So the final thing I'll ask Matt, because Mark, I know your position on the 12-team college football playoff. Me and Mark have this disagreement. I think it's going to be a complete disaster, and it's not going to get the intended effect Mark wants it to have.
Whoa. I think you've misrepresented what I've had to say. I'm a little bit more neutral on it, but go ahead.
Okay. Sorry for the misrepresentation, Mark. I think in the end, with the 4 teams, it'll all be Big Ten and SEC teams. I think what's going to happen is your ACC, your Pac-12, and Big 12 teams are going to get crushed in the beginning rounds. What do you think about it, Matt?
Well, I do think that the SEC and Big Ten are in position to dominate the field. The fact that they're going to have 16 teams for this era, so that just increases the odds that they're going to be able to get several bids. With more teams in the mix, and of course they're both adding blue bloods. The SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma, the Big Ten adding USC. So that's more elite programs in the mix. They are poised to get the vast majority of those slots. But there are a few things locked into the 12-team playoff that are undeniably good for college football. 1, on-campus playoff games. That's going to be new. 2, group of 5 team is going to regularly get a place at the table. So, it might be only one place at the table out of the 12, but it's still a place at the table in a playoff game. So, what you had with Cincinnati in 2021, representing the AAC, you're going to have that on a regular basis. So this is what Chris Peterson and Boise State would have given their left arm, leg, tendon, eyeball socket, to be able to do, to have that shot in the playoff. So there are several things which undeniably, inherently move college football forward. But the problem is that you still don't have established criterion. And this is why I go back to the 2014 season as a year which was just so destructive for college football. It didn't destroy the sport, but it definitely eroded the sport. It made the sport less. It decreased my enjoyment. I still enjoy college football a ton, don't get me wrong, but it made me so much more angry. It made me so much more frustrated about the sport, because I thought that with the BCS being left behind, we were finally going to get, just specific ordered criteria. This is the first determinant. This is the second, third, fourth, so based on these 1, 2, 3, 4 things in order of priority, we would arrive at the proper selection of teams. There would be clarity. A lot of these junk food debates that we so often have in college football at the end of seasons, and which were such a feature of the BCS era, there was at least the hope. I wasn't expecting it, but there was at least the hope that in that first year, 2014, of the playoff, we'd leave behind the junk food argumentation of the BCS, and we would just get, all right, here's the first thing you have to do, here's the second thing, third, fourth. And it didn't happen. That committee couldn't give us clear ordered criteria. And then for TCU, and you can say that Ohio State deserved it. On the merits, I'm not going to die on that hill. I'm not going to fight anyone who says that, all right? It's not about TCU good, Ohio State bad. But the fact that TCU was third in the penultimate poll, in the penultimate college football playoff rankings that year, and it absolutely dismantled Iowa State in the final game and slipped not one spot, not 2 spots, but 3 spots after winning a blowout game. And of course, Iowa State's bad, but still, TCU still won that game by 1 billion points. If you're going to bother to put TCU third in that next to last 2014 playoff poll, that communicated to everyone pretty obviously. Like a reasonable person would look at all of that and say, all right, if TCU beats Iowa State by 1 billion points, it's in. A reasonable person would conclude that. If you were not sure that TCU deserved to be in, or you did not think TCU on the merits deserved to be in, you would at least need to have TCU fourth, at least. And you would probably need to have TCU fifth. Like that Wisconsin team that Ohio State absolutely annihilated. All right, good team, not great team. All right. It's not as though Ohio State beat the 1985 Chicago frickin' Bears. All right. It beat a decent, solid, good Gary Anderson, Melvin Gordon, Wisconsin team. The idea that TCU made this huge drop and Ohio State made this huge rise based on that weekend, with TCU doing its job, doing it what it was supposed to do, that just shattered so many people's faith in the playoff system and in college football to ever get it right, because we thought that this was going to be a new frontier, a new vista, finally having clarity and mature resolutions to what are almost always, the messy denouements for college football seasons. Like this sport is messy, but there was finally supposed to be, adults in the room. And when that didn't happen, and when it didn't happen at the expense of TCU and Baylor versus Ohio State, everyone in the country could do 2 and 2 plus 4. Everyone could do the basic math. Oh, so that's how it is. The blue blood's going to get the benefit of the doubt, and the non-traditional schools are going to be left out. Like everyone could put that together, and it has continued to happen throughout the college football playoff era. And the only reason, we all know this, the only reason Cincinnati got in over Notre Dame in 2021, it had the head-to-head win on the road. Like that's the only reason Cincinnati got in. If Cincinnati did not have that gleaming, FU poker chip, shut the door point on its side, it wouldn't have gotten in. It would have been Notre Dame or Oklahoma State in that final spot. Maybe Baylor. So like the 2014, I cannot emphasize enough how much that year did to erode our faith in college football and the ability to get things right. So if the 12-team playoff has things in it that are unsavory or unwelcome, I'm just here to say you have undeniable baked-in benefits with the group of 5 team always getting a shot, other specific teams in specific situations always getting a shot, on-campus games so that like Southern teams might have to go to Northern locations. That would be a clear improvement. The bottom line is you can't injure the sport worse in the 12-team format than the injury done to college football in the BCS and then in that 2014 playoff debacle that we had.
Well, I can't believe I'm going to stick up for the College Football Playoff Committee, but I am. So first and foremost, I haven't had a huge issue with their decisions through the years. So my issue is not so much with the committee's decisions as it is that we even have a committee. So as I was asked at the time that we moved from the BCS formula into a college football playoff, is this a good thing for college football? Is this a step in the right direction? My response was, well, yes and no. Yes, in that it provides worthy teams of an opportunity, 2 more worthy teams of an opportunity to actually hit the field and play 2 games to show that they have earned a national championship. It's a faulty system because we've got 5 conferences and we're trying to fit them into 4 slots. And then we've got Notre Dame, and then we've got other conferences that have other worthy teams with resumes. So I never agreed with 4 teams in a 5-conference sport. But in terms of 2014, where I will defend their approach is it's similar to the approach that I take every week in ranking the teams, where first of all, not every slot is created equal. Like one's not here, two has the exact same distance between 1 and 2, the same exact distance between 2 and 3, 3 and 4. You know, there could be an enormous gap between 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7 could all be razor close. So we never know, because they're cryptic in their responses. We don't know where they stand there, and they're protecting themselves to not get trapped. And so I understand that they're going to keep their decision making to a certain extent cryptic. I never understood why Oregon and Alabama were taken out of this discussion. Florida State was the only undefeated team in the country. You know, it should have been a decision in my eyes between Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor. The problem with the Big 12 is, number one, they didn't have the foresight to determine a champion, a one champion.
Yeah, that was a mess.
They made a lot of issue. The Big 12 during that stretch of time just did not manage their league very well. And their issue
100%.
was, we were going into a playoff era where champions were going to be given a large weight toward this playoff, and they couldn't determine, nor did they take the time or attention to determine we are going to be able to deliver, even though in absence of a championship game, one champion. So they had co-champions. So that's a problem.
It
And I would
undeniably affected all of that. No question about it.
And I could go on from there. I'm not going to play the homer and defend Ohio State's schedule, because I know Matt's he's not attacking Ohio State. It's number 3 team.
Yeah, I mean, my objection to that, how that all went down, is why was TCU third in the next to last poll if it was going to then drop 3 spots? Like that just made no sense. If Ohio State was in the top 4 in the penultimate poll, you know, then like we're not having this conversation, because then there would have been consistency. Just want to mention, in terms of, you know, the soul of college football and is college football going to be destroyed or, you know, severely harmed by the 12-team playoff? Just have to get this on record, because I might have some new viewers here at the Voice of College Football, people who, you know, don't watch USC Trojans live Monday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, who don't watch Tim Prangley and Rick Anaya on Trojan Conquest live Sundays at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. For people who don't watch me or who don't watch the USC channel regularly, just have to get this on record to make sure you get my view of how college football ought to do its postseason. Like, if you made me emperor for a day, 1985 style bowl system, all right, but with a +1 after the bowls. That it doesn't solve every problem, but it certainly would solve most problems. It would solve most of the 2-team disputes we've had through the years, whether it's USC, LSU 2003, or back to Colorado, Georgia Tech 1990, Miami, Washington 1991. Play the bowls the way they were played in the mid-1980s, and then you have a +1 game a week to 2 weeks later. Who doesn't go for that? And the specific reason why that solution would be so great for college football. You look at a postseason. I think the quintessential college football postseason, in terms of, you know, why we need a +1 after the bowls, 1983. That was as good an example as you'll find for why we need to just go back to a traditional bowl system and then put the +1 on at the end. Because what did we have in the 1983 season? You had Nebraska against Miami. That was 1-5, I believe, in the Orange Bowl. You had number 2 Texas against number 7 Georgia in the Cotton. You had number 3 Auburn versus number 8 Michigan in the Sugar. And you had number 4 Illinois in the Rose Bowl against UCLA. So what did that layout mean? It meant that even if you were like number 7 Georgia or you were number 5 Miami, you know, you still had a place in this. Like, you were going to New Year's Day thinking, all right, I mean, it's not likely that number 1 Nebraska and number 2 Texas are going to lose, but if those dominoes fall, or if that Plinko chip falls in the right spot on The Price is Right, maybe we can rise all the way up to number 1. And we've seen number 5, number 6 teams in past years from those eras. Like think of Notre Dame in 1977, made that rise up the rankings with number 1, number 2, number 3 all falling in the bowl games. It put more than 4 teams in the mix for the national championship heading into New Year's Day. So you're getting more fan bases involved. More people and more communities had more reasons to watch the full amount of bowl games on New Year's Day. So that's more than what we have now with the college football playoff, where it's just those 4 schools. A number 5, number 6 team in the old bowl setup would be eliminated from national championship contention. But in the old days, a number 5, 6, 7 ranked team still had its foot in the door. And so you involve more fan bases, you draw more national interest as a result. And then after that mad scramble on New Year's Day, then you can look at the rearranged pieces. You play that +1 on an island, kind of the way the 1987 Fiesta Bowl was. That was a standalone game removed from New Year's Day. Standalone game between Miami and Penn State on a Friday here in the desert in Phoenix was a blockbuster. That to me is something college football always could have done and should have done, but didn't. So the real MVP of if you want to get the right blueprint, the right model, to me, that's it. So I'm not going to hate on the 12-team playoff because it's kind of just an extension of what we already have. But the best way to do this is not through a playoff. It's through bowls and +1.
Quickly before Tim jumps in, there are some people, and we hear this argument made about the 2014 season that the Ohio State championship justifies the decision made. Not in my eyes. Sure, it did, and I understand that logic. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I don't think it's completely invalid. But the committee is not charged to make a prediction on who's going to win the playoff. They are charged with selecting the 4 best teams, or the 4 most deserving teams. And so what happens after that, we cannot judge these decisions based on hindsight. Tim, what's going on today?
Actually, I just got in here to see if you wanted to use a phone line. I'm still under the weather, so I could barely talk. But I was listening to the conversation. Adriel and Matt, you both make good points. It's like in video games. My son plays a lot of video games, and there's cheating where you're absolutely breaking the rules, right? And then there's exploits where basically it's no, this is within, you can do this, but it's just, you do this. And the biggest one was I remember when I played video games, getting, having a bow as you're running back for the Raiders and just taking out a sweep and just scoring every time. It's an exploit. You're going to win every time, right? I see what they're doing in the SEC is not cheating. It's well within the rules, but everybody sees what you're doing. You're running the same play every play and scoring a touchdown, just like you did Tecmo Bowl, right? It's the same thing. Your lower level teams are able to get into bowl games because they win. They go 500 in conference and they get to go to a bowl, or less. Maybe not even 500 in conference, and still can go to a bowl game.
Let's not overplay that. They probably get 1, maybe 2 teams in based on that. We can't assume that they would lose that extra conference game. First of all the 6-6 teams, like a Missouri last year, would have to play an extra conference game. They probably have a 30-40% chance of winning that extra conference game. So we can't assume that they would lose that extra conference game. But yes, the SEC has had more teams play in bowl games because they play 8 conference games. Absolutely.
And we all know football, and football is a game of attrition. And a big part of that is getting a second bye week towards the end of November.
That's a good point.
Where you play a tune-up team. When you have to go on a 5-6 game haul, let's say 3 of them maybe even on the road, and you're trying to wrap up your season and you're losing guys. Part of the reason why USC last year fell apart at the end, a big part of that is because there was a lot of injuries, a lot of dinged up guys playing because they didn't have depth. That's their own fault, right? Sort your roster. But if USC could have had a game somewhere in there to rest up all their starters, and I'll have them all rest up and play, maybe a quarter of football and beat up on some Cal State team, or whatever, some Little Sisters of the Poor, and then be able to relax and then go into the last maybe game or two of the season and then maybe play a championship game and then move on. But you don't have that, but you do have it every year in the SEC. And so having that ability, it's not just the sheer number of games, it's that break that you get.
Yes.
That's just as important as a one game here or there. It's breaking up a group, because, you know, college football is grueling. The SEC has great teams in it, but it's not like the Big Ten doesn't. It's not like the Big Ten is a bunch of, you know, Division II teams, right? So, you know, it's the hard pill to swallow that they are so good that they have to have this stuff because it's just they're so good. I'm not buying it, and I haven't bought it. Just like Matt, we've been talking for years, going all the way back to the 2000s. They've been doing the same thing, going all the way back, and yeah, it's kind of hard to swallow.
Just the specific point you make that I want to amplify is the mental breather that you get when you engage in FCS Cupcake Saturday, the week before your rivalry game and your conference championship game. You know, the ability to play Chattanooga, you know, after you've gone through most of the SEC gauntlet and before you play the Iron Bowl against Auburn and then the SEC championship game, mentally, like, you know, we know that you're not going to play every game mentally the same way. And also, you know, the SEC powerhouses, they can give their backups meaningful snaps. Like if their backups, you know, are still trying to round into form, that FCS game in mid-November gives those backups a chance, you know, to perform, to develop a little bit. And that might give you just an extra chess piece to use in your rivalry game, in your SEC championship game, heading into the postseason. So the mental reset and the mental breather afforded, along with the physical component, that the value of that can't be understated in this larger conversation. And
listen, I love hearing from Daryl, but I was talking to Mark yesterday about, you know, people getting some new callers in here, and Mark, you don't mind? I could drop the phone number in there, see if someone wants to call in on a landline or on a phone line.
Sure, we have some time for that. Matt may need to take off. But,
yeah, I do need to be jetting off.
Matt, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the insight. Catch Matt's work on Trojans Wire, folks. Trojans Wire. Anything going on there that we need to be looking out for?
Well, we're covering San Diego State, right? Because that's a big piece of Pac-12 news, and USC has a bunch of official visits this weekend. Could be a huge recruiting weekend for Lincoln Riley. But I want to just highlight these USC channel YouTube memberships. Mark and I aren't talking about garden variety topics here. We're dealing with choice cuts. Like, this is not Mama's Sloppy Joe. No offense to Mom, but this is filet mignon. You know, these are the choice cuts, and you get them at the middle and upper membership tiers. You'll like what you get. You'll get value for your contribution if you join the USC channel at the medium or high membership tiers. So please consider joining. At least like a ton of Big Ten fans here in the chat. Check out Mark and me, Mark and I, going over the biggest, most important year in the history of the Big Ten Conference in college football. Like, I think you'll really enjoy that particular conversation. And then if you like that, then you can tell other people how much value you're getting from a USC channel YouTube membership.
Thank you so much, Matt. We appreciate you, and have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.
Get Better Tim for Trojan Conquest Live, Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Have that honey ginger lemon tea.
I'm doing my best.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Matt. And you guys, Matt's Trojans Wire is the first thing I go to every single morning. Like, I wake up, it's like almost like Christmas morning. You know, little kids run downstairs and they go to see what they have going. Because Matt, you guys post a lot of stuff late at night, and then I wake up to all of it, and then there it is. I just read through it, and it catches me up on everything: recruiting, a lot of scheduling stuff about the Big 12 last week. Now you're talking about the action in the Pac-12 with San Diego State. So if you guys aren't checking out, even if you're just a college football fan, if you want to know about football, Matt has this ability to bring in all other sports and all different time eras into timely topics. And so it's like, you know, it's storytelling, and it's a great way to wake up in the morning. So I suggest you guys, I dropped the link a couple of times in the chat, so I hope you check it out.
Well said. Matt does have a gift for taking the historic, which he has a definite hold on, grasp on, and then bringing it to the current events, the current topics and breaking news, and tying it all together. It's a remarkable find that we have here with Matt and what he brings us every week.
I was just so fascinated by his answer. Sorry, I haven't spoken for a while. Because he agrees with me about the playoffs. He likes the +1 model. I was shocked by that because for the longest time it sounded like he wants guaranteed playoff spots. But it sounds like he just wants a +1 model, which
what I like about the +1 model is that it would bring attention back to college football on New Year's Day. And right now, just us nerds and junkies want to watch New Year's Day bowl games because they're generally meaningless. But then that would bring all the attention to New Year's Day, all the relevance, all those games would be hyper important. I do think that if you would go from year to year through the history of the sport, in some years it would be difficult to choose what two teams should be playing in the national championship.
yeah, but you would have to admit those are pretty few and far between.
I don't know about that.
Well, okay. Now, when you say that, are you talking about there's an argument for more than two teams? There's like a third team that could play like a spoiler, but we all know kind of really doesn't have a chance? Or are you saying no, there's a dead heat between like three teams?
I'm saying that I don't know if it's 70% of the time, 30% of the time, but it's not once every 20 years that there would be, in my eyes, by my judgment, a difficulty in selecting the two teams that earned it in, placement into a national championship game.
The problem is you're going to end up with 6, right? Like six teams, 3 bowls, then have the +1s. Is that you're thinking, Mark? With the power 5s.
Well, you would have
like a Rose Bowl. You'd have the Big Ten versus the Pac-12.
Right? Yeah, if we went back to 1980,
and then
we went back to 1985. Then yes, the Sugar Bowl would be the SEC versus an at-large, and the Orange Bowl would be, and of course we wouldn't have to completely go back to 1985. We could steer it in a direction that would clarify the situation in the best possible way. But just because there's a Pac-12 champion and a Big Ten champion doesn't mean that that's the best matchup for what is, in a sense, semifinals. I know semifinals involves 4 teams, but a round before the selection of the championship game.
Yeah, I mean, we could take last year's a perfect example. USC would have been a better team for the Rose Bowl than Utah.
Well, with a healthy quarterback, maybe. Yeah.
Well, USC, they were still ranked the higher team, correct?
That has nothing to do with selection into the Rose Bowl. It would have been Michigan and Utah.
Yeah, they lost their conference game. They don't belong.
I understand, but if you want to maximize your chance,
who makes that decision? Okay, we've got this championship, but you know what? So and so is better.
Mark, I'm not advocating for it. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying if you want to increase the likelihood that one of your conference is represented in the +1, you would put the 2 highest ranked teams by the CFP committee to play in that Rose Bowl. So you would have the highest ranked Big Ten team play the highest ranked Pac-12 team.
Yeah, well, we'd eliminate the CFP committee.
Well, why don't we just go back to polls then, Daryl, and just forget about who wins on the field. Let's just who he thinks is the prettiest. We'll say that they're the winner.
No, I like having it on the field.
Okay,
that's why
I like having it on the field. I just want it to where it's not complete blowouts. That's what I'm afraid is going to happen.
I don't think so. And hear me out on this. I think what the SEC has done for a while is amazing. I do. I think a lot of the powers that be, a lot of the Miamis, right? Florida States, USC's, Washington's, a lot of these really good traditional teams have been asleep at the wheel. And there's been a concentration of talent for a number of reasons at a few schools in the Southeast. Agreed. But we just saw Ohio State be like a 3-star kicker away from winning the national championship, probably. And so it's not like that gap. There was a while there where LSU was just blowing the doors off everyone. Alabama blowing the doors, Georgia.
Right, but it's not just an SEC problem. It's also a Big Ten problem because it's them two and then the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 in the first round.
No, hold on. You're looking backwards. Look at now and forward. If USC is going to be the team I think they're going to be and how they're gearing up to be, I think that's going to be like a 4-horse race in the Big Ten. Just like you probably see with Alabama kind of, wobbling. I'm still calling them the champs, even though the Dogs have won 2 in a row. Until you show us otherwise, Saban keeps popping back up. But is it a 2-horse race in the SEC between the Alabama and Georgia? Or no, you say LSU's right there.
I would throw LSU in there.
Tennessee around, right? So now you got 4 and 4, and so I don't think and the more you spread it out, the more these kids spread out too. NIL, we don't know what the effect of NIL is going to be. For a while there, the SEC had all of the players, but can they keep doing that? Maybe not.
Right, but what you're arguing is instead of it being located just in the Southeast, it's everything west of Texas is still going to be irrelevant for the national picture.
Pretty sure USC's west of Texas, but
okay, outside of them,
I'm pretty sure Washington's west of Texas.
I would consider them irrelevant.
Irrelevant?
To win the national championship, they're irrelevant.
Get the right coach? Some NIL? Have you ever been to Mont Lake?
No, I have not been to Washington State.
No, the state of Seattle. It's not exactly a tiny little burg somewhere. Seattle's a major international city.
I get that, but still, I just don't consider them, Oregon, to have a real chance to win the national championship.
I don't think Oregon either. I don't think Oregon's going to win the national championship. I don't.
I don't think any team in the Big 12 has a chance to win the national championship.
I agree.
I don't think any team outside of Clemson, Florida State, maybe Miami.
That's 3 teams.
Maybe Miami. Maybe. They've been down so bad. I think it's just cultural, systemic issues for them.
Would you agree that all the teams you just named with the right coach could, be right back in the conversation? Let's say we put Kirby Smart in, let's say whatever. He falls down, hits his head on the dock, and says, you know what, I'm going to be the coach out in Miami. You're telling me that Miami would instantly be the team to beat, probably?
I wouldn't go instantly, but I think it'd be like a Florida State where it takes 4 to 5 years to rebuild.
How long take USC?
Well, they're a different situation.
Miami's the same thing.
I think Mario Cristobal is just a pretty good recruiter.
He's pretty good. He's not great. Here's the thing. He got his chops because he was in the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 was down. Let's talk about that. Mario was up at Oregon. Who was the coach at USC? Clay Helton. Right. Look at the coaches in the Pac-12 that Mario had to go up against, and then add in all that Uncle Phil money and all their great facilities and stuff. How good is it? Because now he's down there with that Ruiz money, and he's not exactly tearing it up. I think Miami with the right coach, and I'm not sure if it is Mario Cristobal, but with the right coach, same thing with Florida State.
Right, I think Norvell's the right coach for Florida State, but if it ain't Mario Cristobal, who would be the right coach for Miami? Because it just felt like this is the people of Miami who they wanted.
As a USC fan, I'll tell you, going back to glory years, pulling in assistants from Pete Carroll, like Sarkisian and then Kiffin. By the way, Kiffin, I always got crap from everybody. I like Kiffin as a coach, even when what he did under those sanctions, short of a miracle. But what USC kept doing is trying to go relive the past, right? Well, maybe Miami's suffering from that as well. Thinking, we'll bring Mario back and we'll do this and that, and blah blah, and we'll be great. Maybe they need to go outside and get the absolute best guy available, not necessarily a guy that has Miami ties.
Okay. Because it's just me, but I felt like this was kind of Miami's last gasp of ever reaching the national championship anytime within the next 10 years. I couldn't see it. If they didn't do it with Mario, then I don't think they can do it with anybody in the short-term future.
I can't. I can only tell you from my perspective. What Lincoln Riley did at USC is nothing short of a miracle. And if Riley could do it at USC, and I know Riley's not just any coach, and I know that USC is not just any school, but Miami is that kind of, Miami's Miami. Why are we even debating this? Miami could turn this thing around in a heartbeat with the right coach, just like any major school. LSU, if they get the right coach, sorry, Mark, if any of these teams could do that, and instantly.
To me, LSU is in a different tier. I consider Miami to be like Nebraska. They were once great, but they probably can't reach it again.
Difference is I think we'd say that is the recruiting home that they have, the hotbed. Look where Miami is. Look at Lincoln. I'm not ripping on Lincoln or Nebraska, but you don't get the level of talent. I mean, look at the population.
Yeah,
you
there's
don't
nowhere
get
close to the level of player. Yeah,
Right.
they've got to go to Texas to get players.
And so when they moved to the Big Ten, they lose that base. It was that Big 12 base, and it was just a bad idea. You know, where they're getting all the recruits from was Texas. Well, now they leave the Big 12 and go to the Midwest. And then what happened? Obviously, you saw all that recruiting stop.
It was a good idea for making money, a bad idea for winning football games.
Yeah. So I think we will see. I don't know, but you're already starting to see it. You know, when Nick Saban's starting to talk about NIL and getting all nervous about this and, you know, whatever, it shows you that there's something going on. I mean, I was laughing. I mean, geez, Nick Saban was talking about USC recruiting like 2 years in a row now. You know, that means something. That means something. You know, USC is going into Georgia and pulling Georgia top 100 players now. You know, you can see Miami doing the same thing. You see, the more and more NIL becomes a factor in all of this, I think that you're not going to see these teams stack. And also, remember, you can't, like in the past, these defensive lines in the SEC have been amazing. You have NFL guy for NFL guy stacking them up. Well, these guys don't want to sit around anymore. So if they're not playing like a Bear Alexander, they're going to go somewhere else and play and get on the field and go to the NFL. That you can't stack your defensive lines like you did in the past. And for what we talked about earlier, as a game of attrition later in the season, you don't have that third string tackle that's going to be in the NFL one day, you know, and that might make a difference too.
Well, Tim, I wish I had your level of optimism for the sport. I wish I did, because college football sounds like it's going to be a great, exciting future for the sport with a lot of parity. A lot more parity than we've seen in the last 20 years by your estimation, but I just don't see it.
20 years? Like 15 years, you mean?
15.
You mean 15 years, yeah.
Okay. Tim, I'm going to ask you a question that might cause a little controversy, but, you know, we need to liven up the stream a bit. Have you made a list of 20 coaches that are better than Brian Kelly?
Yeah. Let's see. Jason Negro at Bosco. Let's see. I could give you the list, but I wrote it down. It's upstairs. Again, we're not breaking this up again. I wasn't debating that, you know, that says something about, you know what, maybe we're talking about Mario Cristobal right now. Maybe there's a void of really good coaches out there right now. Or maybe those coaches, you know, like a DeBoer or these guys that are coming up right now that don't have a name for themselves. Yeah, he's been around for 20 some odd years. Yeah, he did great at Grand Valley. You know, yeah, you know, he had some good teams at Cincinnati. But I will argue with anyone till I'm blue in the face that he underachieved at Notre Dame. Everyone wants to kick Notre Dame. Oh, Notre Dame can't do this. Notre Dame can't do that. Yes, they can. It's Notre Dame. And the guy was a terrible recruiter. Now, he's in LSU, which is great because he might be a good coach. He might be a good manager, maybe a good program manager, but he is not a good recruiter. I talked to anybody, not just me or fans, talk to media about Notre Dame. One thing I'll say to you, name me 2 or 3 great quarterbacks from Notre Dame under Kelly. Hey, we got a call coming in. You guys want to grab it real quick?
Sure. Let's take the call.
Hi, on Voice College Football. You there? Oh, they chickened out. Oh, well. If that was you and you didn't chicken out, call back. But Brian Kelly's never had a top quarterback, really. Has he?
No.
When have we ever heard of Notre Dame not having receivers and quarterbacks that are like NFL guys? There've been a couple. They had Floyd. You know, there've been a couple receivers. But to go that many 11 years at Notre Dame and not have like an All-American or an NFL quarterback, it's pretty bad.
I think their run of receivers in turning receivers into NFL receivers, maybe they've not been elite receivers, but they've had a pretty good run of receivers going to the NFL. But Ian Book is probably the best quarterback. Let me think if I can come up with anyone better. So no, he is not recruited or developed a great quarterback. Not at all.
I think we got Will on. Will, are you there?
What's up, guys?
Mark, you able to hear Will?
Will, what's going on? I do.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, cool. All right, great. I had to come in. I just got off work and I was talking to my mom, and then I thought you guys were still live, so I had to hop in. I came in at a good time.
Yeah. So what do you think about Brian Kelly?
I mean, I agree with what you said. I agree that we never got like an elite quarterback. Like I feel like Ian Book could have been developed better. I felt like he never really improved from 2018, and I felt like he stagnated in 2019 and 2020. Maybe if we had, like, I don't think Tommy Reese's play calling is bad, but I do think his quarterback development definitely had a lot to be desired. And I feel like that maybe Book could have became something special, but he just wasn't developed enough or just didn't have the talent.
But I mean, are any of those guys we just named like NFL first round draft picks?
No,
Right. And so
absolutely.
that's really kind of now we will both admit, and I don't know how much it was Heinstad. What was the name of the offensive line coach?
Harry Stan.
Right. That guy, I don't know how much it was a function of him, but what did I think about those great Notre Dame teams? They'd pop every 3 years or so. And it would used to be like this bumper crop of like really good offensive linemen right across the board, NFL guys. And they would just road grade people. But then in the other years, it just seemed like your skill positions were lacking. Is that unfair for me to say under Kelly?
I don't think the running backs were lacking, but I definitely think the wide receivers were. For sure. And we got Chancey Stuckey, who's been doing a great job recruiting receivers under Marcus Freeman. And it's just such a breath of fresh air to look at these guys film and be able to get excited. I mean, they aren't USC level recruits, but they are at least high 4-star guys. And I think some of them may eventually turn into first-round picks. I'm really high on Tobias Merriweather this year. Really excited to see him.
Yeah, I like what you guys did with Chris Tyree. I think moving him to the slot, right? He went from running back to slot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great move. And then you got to tell us who's your tight end going to be. You guys always have a tight end.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys out there that might start. Holden Stace is probably going to be the guy, but I'm not totally sure yet. We'll figure out during camp.
What do you think about that? What do you think about the scheduling, SEC, and all the stuff we were talking about? Did you hear that conversation?
No, I didn't get that. I didn't.
All right. Well, I want to move away from the Brian Kelly thing because I was over that yesterday. I was over that 24 hours ago.
All right.
I definitely was.
Yeah.
But I'm here to talk about what anyone wants to debate. So I cannot turn down any debates at any time. This is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I never had all three of you guys quiet.
Anything else, Will?
No. Well, what do you guys think a success for Notre Dame this season has to be when looking at the schedule? Do you think winning 2 out of the 3 bowl game, or do you think winning 1 out of 3 bowl games out of the big games in the bowl game? What do you guys think as out?
Wait a minute. Wait, I got to reject this premise outright. Okay, I don't see Notre Dame beating Ohio State. I don't see them beating Clemson and who was USC. They're not going to. I don't see them beating USC. And then they got to play at Duke and at Louisville. I mean, they'll probably split between those two teams. So look, Notre Dame's looking at what, an 8-4 season?
They split
They're gonna
with the offense that we're gonna be with we're gonna have a great quarterback to lead the team for the first time in forever, and the skill positions are gonna improve even more.
Yeah, what happened the last time Sam Hartman played Louisville? Oh, he had like 8 turnovers. I mean, I get Sam Hartman's the greatest quarterback Notre Dame's had in a while, but that doesn't mean he's this super elite quarterback. I mean, I'm just not sold on him like everybody else is. But
he's up there.
He's up there, but that doesn't mean he's elite. He's just better than average.
He's a top 5 to 10 quarterback. He's much better than average. He's their best quarterback since Brady Quinn.
If you say so, I still think they're going 8-4, personally.
Okay.
I think they lose the
Who the
big
four
three
losses?
into Duke. And that's assuming, by the way, they don't have another Marshall or Stanford incident. I mean, Central Michigan, listen, that could be a trap game.
Now
They
you're
could lose to
now you're
Central
just
Michigan.
trolling, dude. Come on.
I'm not trolling. It's the week right before Ohio State. They could overlook them.
I hear you starting to laugh, real. All right, but
I believe, Will, that they should be able to win one of those three. Not that they can't win two of those three marquee games. And maybe they slip up or trip up against somebody else. I'm not looking at their schedule right now, but the Real is pretty much letting us know that Louisville and Duke appear to be the two best teams outside of those three. So I think that 9-3 is acceptable, but they need to go 10-2.
I agree. I agree that Irish do need to go 2-2.
It's going to come down to that your offensive play calling. Period. I think you got the quarterback. You know, Hartman's there. You have a solid offensive line. It's going to come down to play calling. I mean, I actually, to tell you the truth, I don't know much about how much you lost on defense, but you know, clearly Hartman's a huge upgrade.
Think secondary. This is going to be the best Notre Dame secondary in a long time. But there are some questions around the linebackers and defensive line. But I feel like we won't get torched by the guys in the Trojans passing attack. Like, obviously they'll have big plays, but they'll be not as easy as it was last year.
There's also a trip to NC State.
Mm-hmm.
See, I told you, Mark, Central Michigan, right in between, at NC State and Ohio State. That is a trap game, in my opinion.
Who's NC State's quarterback going to be?
It's going to be Brennan Armstrong.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay.
They also
Mark,
have
do you know
Pitt at
the,
home. That's not going to be a cakewalk.
Sean, super chat, $10, and I'll leave immediately. Sean, go ahead and send Mark Rogers a $10 super chat, and I will click this little button right here, and I'll be gone in a heartbeat.
Mark, do you know the over-under for Notre Dame?
I want to say 9.5.
Well, last I saw, I just checked. It says 8.5.
8.5. Okay.
So 8-4 is looking more likely than 10-2 according to Vegas.
According to Vegas.
So
yeah,
you know, they got big casinos and stuff, so they're usually pretty spot on.
They're usually spot on, but we could certainly run down a number of teams every season in which they completely miss on, just like the rest of us.
Well, you're right, Mark. But out of that schedule, I mean, Ohio State, Clemson, USC, at Duke, at Louisville, at NC State, those are 6 pretty difficult games. And I don't think it's fair just to give Marcus Freeman the benefit of the doubt that they're just going to beat up on everybody they should. If they had Brian Kelly as their head coach, for example.
I have to say something. I'm not saying that Marcus Freeman is going to be as good as the head coach as Kirby Smart did, but people were down in Kirby Smart hitting it and do his second season, and that team was pretty good. And they lost some games that they shouldn't have. And 20.
They lost to Vandy.
Yeah,
his first year.
I feel like Notre Dame, I mean, maybe it won't be quite as good as that 2017 season, but I have a feeling that the Irish will be back to being an elite team.
Well, they have the quarterback for it. Again, I'm just I don't know about your play caller. That's fine. We'll see. You know, if he's.
It's definitely not the guy that they wanted as a first choice.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, maybe having the quarterback will mitigate that. But it's kind of hard because I think a lot of the defense you're going to be playing, you know, you don't want to be breaking in a brand new OC, like brand new to your team. I mean, a brand new OC against Clemson's defense, against Ohio State's defense. I just don't think that's going to be. That's not what the doctor ordered. If you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Stanford's back on the schedule.
Stanford is on the schedule. With our quarterbacking, I have much more faith that we won't lose the teams that we shouldn't.
Thank you, Lemansky. Go Hawks.
Thanks, Lemansky. Appreciate you. Tim's a team player. Absolutely. He is. Tim and Rick every Sunday night, folks, over on the USC channel, 5 Pacific.
All right, Sean, you're running out of time to call in. I'm not sure if you're coming or not. Maybe Will, you want to hop off, see if Sean wants to come in before we shut it down?
For sure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks
for the debate tonight. Debate.
Thanks, Will, for calling in. The first national call was Will. See, there you go. You're the answer to a trivia question now.
Yes, he is. A very important one.
All right, Sean, phone lines are open. 323-285-1231. Sean, give us a call. Tell us all about college football, what I'm missing. Can't wait. Mark, think he's going to call?
I'm going to bet against it because the record of people calling in when they are asked to call is extremely low.
Well, when they start talking about Lincoln Underoos, genuinely, I'm not sure if he even has a credit card, let alone a phone. So maybe he can borrow his mom's phone. I don't know.
It's an option.
Right there.
Mark, why don't you post the StreamYard link for some of the new people that I got in there? I mean, for example, I see Connor Johnson, Mike Ford in there. Connor probably wants to talk about San Diego State University and his Pac-12.
Right.
Mike might get us a preview of how Michigan's better than Nebraska in 1997.
Yes. So coming up tonight, everyone, at 10 o'clock Eastern time, it's going to be on the Nebraska channel, the Michigan channel. We are going to have and settle the debate. I'm sure it won't be settled, but we'll have a good time talking about it, discussing and debating, arguing 1997 Michigan against 1997 Nebraska. I am dropping the link in the chat as well, and we've got about 15 minutes tops here, folks. So please join the show.
Mark, can I ask you, when are you going to do your predictions?
Well, if I want to have a business mindset, I should be doing my predictions right now because then they can sit there all summer for people to watch the videos. So that's what I should do. What I typically do is I unveil those predictions like the night before the season starts and they're outdated immediately. So you're right. I should start. I've been planning on doing schedule previews, so I should just go ahead and do my predictions with the schedule previews. I was going to start schedule previews next week, and early next week unveil the all-time program rankings.
Let's keywords loud. Mike
3883. The counter to keep Tim on the show. Mike, thank you.
Now I got to come with $21 to get me out of here. So, sorry, $20, $19.99, I think. Ask your mom if you can get an advance on your lunch money, and maybe you can get in here.
And no, Connor, we have not eliminated StreamYard. You still have that option. So you've got the call-in option. The ticker's on the bottom of the screen. You also have StreamYard. The link's in the chat. For anybody that's on here that missed the first 2+ hours, had a great conversation with Matt Zemek concerning all these scheduling changes and the release in the SEC and the Big Ten of 2024, plus the breaking news of San Diego State sending their resignation notice to the Mountain West and where San Diego State is headed next. So great conversation with Matt.
Mark,
2 hours. Check it out.
Mark, are you going to get Tony Altimore to break down what this means for us?
We could do that.
Because I'm sure he'll have tons of amazing charts, graphs, all sorts of graphs, a line, bar.
See, the thing is, he could Tony just come on here and just tell us. But unfortunately, some of the people, I'm not pointing any fingers, they need graphs, numbers, and visuals just to help them to conceptualize this stuff.
Well, hey,
But-
listen. I like the line charts, the bar graphs, and all that stuff. Okay, I like it because it's aesthetically pleasing.
Well, it's also statistically accurate, which is even more important. But yes, go ahead.
Yes, of course. That is a very positive benefit.
Right?
to
These
charts
conversations
and
go a lot
graphs.
better when actual numbers and facts instead of hard feelings and emotions get involved, like most of the realignment stuff. Tony, while he has an opinion on it, what I appreciate about Tony is he comes in, he says, here's the facts. There you go. Come up with your own solutions here. And I guarantee you can't say, well, you know, some of the things are being kicked around there. They're exposed. And that's what I appreciate when Mark brings Tony on, is the fact that he doesn't say, well, I think, or this, I think it should be this way. He's like, well, here you go, folks. Here are facts. You know, what do you think is most logically going to happen given these facts? And that's what he presents very well.
Well, I also like it because of the debates that happen within the comment section. They're respectful but passionate, which means
That's
I can
what we
sit back
want.
and eat popcorn and watch it all burn down, which is always fun to do.
Yeah. We hit an earlier comment that I caught. Maybe we had more. I hope not, but we had an earlier comment that I had to remove because it went over the line. So, folks, I'm going to state the oxymoron that I do from time to time, but let's trash talk with respect. I think all of us can kind of grasp where that should be. I would hope so. Reasonable people. So, trash talk the teams. That's fine. Do not trash talk individuals.
Anyway, I'm going to get going. I got to get going. Good talking to you, Mark. Good talking to you, Tim.
Thanks to
Love
Real.
the show, Tim, you did with Anthony Munoz, by the way. Probably my favorite show on
really
here.
a blessing. That was just a blessing. It was awesome. He came on. Even more amazing, he gave us so much time. And really, if you watch that interview, he's just candid. Like, you could ask him a question and he's not guarded. I mean, I guess you're a guy like him. You don't need to be guarded. He just answers right off the cuff, and just the names he kicks around, right? Surreal, just how he just kind of says, then Mosbar came in, and I mean, just the people he could just name and the stories he has about Paul Brown. And yeah, if you haven't checked that out, you guys, you really should go check it out. Just, don't worry. I talked probably about maybe 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, the entire hour, because I knew I had Anthony Munoz on and I want him talking the entire time. So if you can't handle me, which many of you can't, sit back and listen to Anthony talk for an hour. And that's what you really want to do.
Yeah. Why don't we get that link in the chat? I'll grab it here. And we want everyone to be aware of everything we've got available, and especially kind of highlighting USC, since we've got Tim on and had Matt on earlier, because I think we've got something really good going on the USC channel in particular, thanks to Tim, thanks to Rick, thanks to Tony, thanks to Matt. We've got a show each and every Sunday night, Trojan Conquest Live, featuring Tim and Rick. They're amazing guests. I don't know if they're going to be able to reach the mark of Anthony Munoz very often, but some other amazing guests connected to USC football. And then Matt and I get together every Monday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific for Trojans Live. And then Tim has also kicked off a couple Trojan Conquest call-in shows as well.
I don't know, because I thought maybe we got a phone number. It'd be easier for people, but you guys are shy out there. I'll tell you what, Mark's wrapping this thing up. You probably about maybe 1 minute if you want to call in.
Well,
So
see you, Tim. Fight on for you, brother.
Go Cats. Take it easy, man.
There it is, the obligatory fight on until when? When does that expire?
Okay, well, it was a year bet. The real will tell you that it was a year bet, and it was based on the season. So by assumption, is this the end of the season? If it's a 1 year bet, I don't know. He's been a good sport. Maybe we can retire that earlier.
I am looking for the Anthony Munoz interview because, folks, again, I watched it. I tried to do my best to watch all the content that Rick and Tim deliver, but that one in particular, yes.
Yeah, he talks about everything from growing up, with a single parent, overcoming issues at a young age that young people maybe in an environment might have, really getting locked in at football, meeting his wife, marrying her as different times back then in the 70s. Married Dee Dee his sophomore year. then just started getting these devastating knee injuries. Like, people don't realize he played 16 games at USC and got picked number 3 overall. You know, that's just, it just goes to show you that when you have that kind of talent, it was pretty obvious that talent, and the talent USC was stacking at offensive line back then was just insane. He goes into those, you know, he talks about third string. He talks about a third stringer, you guys, that goes on to be in the Hall of Fame as well with Anthony on that line. So, I mean, you can check it out for yourself. And I do promise you, you don't hear much from me. It's just him telling story after story about the Bengals, NFL Hall of Fame, and his time at USC. And a great story for you Buckeye fans out there. I'm not going to give the spoiler away, but there's something about his recruiting that is regretted his, and it had to do with the Buckeyes. So you got to go check that out if you want to find out. I'm not going to hand it to you, but if you're a Buckeye fan, he literally says his one regret in recruiting had to do with something that he didn't do with the Buckeyes. So
we just dropped the link in the chat. Check it out. Anthony Munoz. It's in caps, easy to find. Grab the link, watch the interview, check out everything else we've got going there on our USC channel.
8 o'clock, right? 8 o'clock Eastern for the Nebraska debate. Someone
that's
asked
at actually 10 o'clock. I'm going to be gone for a few hours. That's coming up at 10 Eastern. We don't know. I don't want to confirm this, but it looks like our buddy Joey Foster is going to strike up a West Virginia live show tonight, but we shall see. But that may be at 8 o'clock Eastern, as it typically is. But at 10 o'clock Eastern on the Michigan channel, on the Nebraska channel, we go live to wage that debate. All right. Tim, thanks for being here. I know you're under the weather. Hope you feel better soon.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Great show. Good stuff with Matt. I love seeing Matt here. And you guys remember, Matt is just not a USC guy. You know, Matt is a sports guy. So if you check out his writing at Trojans Wire, you just get sports coverage, really. And so you're missing out if you're not checking it out.
I marvel every week, each time we talk to Matt concerning his sports and specifically college football knowledge across the board. For sure. All right, Tim. Thanks.
See you tonight.
All right. Once again, you see it on the banner right there. 10 o'clock tonight, 10 Eastern, we get together to wage the battle on Michigan, Nebraska 1997. It's part of our Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football, which was in May. But similar to many great promotions, Monday Night Football moved to Thursday, moved to Sunday. It was still Monday Night Football. Others do the same. We will do that here at the Voice of College Football. Anytime we've got a great debate to wage, we will do it here at the Voice of College Football. We've got some other good ones on tap. I'm going to release my all-time program rankings. So we released the 2023 current program rankings a few weeks ago. Now we have enough separation time that we're going forward with the all-time program rankings coming up next week. Also, I have reviewed the playoff years of 2014 through 2022. Check those out as we are taking on the disputed national championships. So next video will be 2013 Florida State. And again, some of them are clear-cut and obvious. Many are not. So check out our disputed national championship videos right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you in just about 4 hours right here, actually on the Nebraska and Michigan channels.